You'd think at some point somebody would make a note to postpone this guy's transfers until November. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today we put the final piece in place and cap off our franchise run of the Halloween series, this time with the 2018 entry, Halloween. The third Halloween, which is not the third Halloween, it's the 11th Halloween, but it's the third Halloween. It's Halloween. So we're back to basics. We're reeling things back. At this point in my review of the second Rob Zombie Halloween movie, it felt like things have gotten way too off track, and as is often the situation with things like that, that's when it's time to reel back and start going back to basics, just like we did with the transition from The Curse of Michael Myers to Halloween H2O. This franchise has been a wild ride and been a lot of fun for me. I'm going to go ahead and do a big cap-off kind of summary in this weekend's vlog of Coffee and Contemplation, so look for that coming up. And before I get into this specific review, I just want to remind everybody out there that if you've been liking these videos, if you've been liking the Rotted reviews and the content that Rotted Entertainment's been putting out, you can do me a big favor by supporting me in a number of ways. You can like, subscribe. There's also the Patreon tip jar of $1 a month tier, and that's the only tier I have, as well as merchandise storefront links are in the description below. So moving on to the Halloween movie itself. This is a film that I adored. I loved the hell out of this film. I thought it was great how we were back to basics in concept and in tone, and even in some ways in characters, but from new angles all around. This movie felt very fresh, very original. It felt very much like a Halloween movie, which was my big complaint about the Rob Zombie movies. This one felt through and through like a Michael Myers Halloween movie. And it still managed to be fresh, to be new, to be updated, and honestly, to catch me by surprise in so many ways. There were elements of this movie that I did not see coming, and it never failed to always keep me on my toes. That's something that is very difficult for the 11th movie in a franchise, especially one that's kind of reeling things back and starting over, is to have concepts and to have characters and ideas that are shocking, are surprising, that I don't see coming. Typically, there's just simply the formula that's followed and we press play. And not so with this movie. There's the spirit of the Halloween franchise imbued within this and its very fibers, but it's also a very surprisingly fresh and interesting standalone movie. So what this movie does is it basically takes everything after the 1978 Halloween movie, including its sequel, and it just takes it and throws it all in the garbage, and it just presupposes that none of that ever happened. There was no Jamie, there was no hospital massacre, there was certainly no Season of the Witch, there was nothing after the first movie. And we pick up on it 40 years later. And in 40 years later, we find our main character of Laurie Strode a psychotic wreck in a way. I mean, she's very functional, but you can tell that she's been clearly scarred. For the first point in this, it shows it in her external factors. This movie starts out with a pair of investigative journalists that are tracking down both Michael Myers and Laurie Strode to find out more about what happened that night. And when we first see Laurie, we see her in basically this home-built bunker that she's a compound really that she's built for herself. But before we see her, we see the investigative journalists interact with Michael Myers. The reason they're going to the hospital that he has been kept in for the last 40 years is because he is about to be transferred. The hospital that they find him at, under the care of Dr. Sartain, played by Haluk Bilginer, is I guess a somewhat nice one under the circumstances, criminally insane and all. But, he professes that, they get fresh air, they get exercise, they get nutrition, they get clean water, they get tummy rubs. And Michael Myers is about to be transferred to a less than desirable facility. Dr. Sartain is retiring, and they're transferring him. And Dr. Sartain was also a student of Dr. Loomis before he passed. So, a nice little nod to to the Dr. Loomis character and Donald Pleasance there. And so these investigative journalists, they find the Michael Myers character and they attempt to communicate with him. And barring gentle attempts to communicate, they try instigating communication by bringing out the mask and basically holding it up in front, behind him, but holding it up to him and yelling, say something, say something. And, while all the other prisoners are going, bonkers, it's a very, very dramatic, terrifying scene as everybody, all the tension wraps up all around them. But the Michael Myers character is the one that is basically not reacting in any way, shape, or form. So we move on from that after they failed to get a communicative response from Michael, and they find Laurie in this compound. And they basically, through the interview that they get with her, kind of bring the audience up to speed too, that she has a daughter and she has a granddaughter. And in the raising of her daughter in a manner that would be, let's just say, self-sufficient, teaching her how to deal with guns, teaching her how to survive, basically teaching her how to survive a Michael Myers attack, because that is the only thing that Laurie has in her brain at that point. She is operating on a place of survival and fear always, and that is how she also tries to raise her daughter when the state takes her away. Never gives her back, loses custody. So, twice divorced, lost her daughter. Laurie is basically living an isolationist, survivalist life. And she's involved to a limited degree with her granddaughter's life. She meets with her on the side, meets with her in private. Her daughter is very protective of her daughter. I guess I should start using names here. Laurie Strode's daughter is named Karen. Karen's daughter is named Allison. So Allison is the granddaughter. And Karen is very protective of Allison. She does not want her to be exposed to Laurie's craziness and to wind up being exposed to the same kind of things that she was as a child. But regardless, of course, when it does come time to transfer Michael Myers, it happens just before Halloween, of course. And in doing so, he escapes and does his wreaking havoc on Haddonfield. That's kind of his thing, and that's what he does. There was a whole lot of this written script that I really, really liked, and a lot of it came down to character choices and character development. When Michael escaped, and Laurie heard about this on the police scanner, because it being Halloween, him being transferred, she is on a super duper heightened sense of alert and awareness. So she has her police scanners going, and she hears about the crash. And at that point, it is game on. She is not, even though she's built herself a bunker and a compound, she has not operated on a sense of strictly defense. She locks and loads and starts driving around town with her police scanner going. She is on the offensive. She is on the hunt. And that's one of the things I really loved about this character, is the aggressive tendencies that she shows. Yes, she is operating from a place of fear, but she is not letting that place of fear stop her from doing whatever she can to overcome it. Whatever she feels about herself, the fact is, she feels like she needs to redeem herself in the eyes of Karen, who sees her as a nutter and resents her for her childhood, as well as protecting Karen and Allison. And that's one of the big motivational things that drives her. Meanwhile, Karen is just completely dubious to any sort of danger at all, and operates almost with a sense of obstinance towards it, almost refusing to lock doors, things like that, just basically defiance of how she was raised. And another character I enjoyed particularly was the Allison character, the granddaughter, played by Andi Matichak. She was phenomenal in this, and I could kind of tell that at some point, at some level, on a spiritual level, they're passing the baton. She is aware of these things. She is in this conflict between her grandmother and her mother, of this heightened self-defense mode and this level of there's no danger out there, everything's lovey-dovey roses, and we don't have to worry about anything. And she's caught in between the middle of that. So she is still coming at things with a certain sense of loving her grandmother and believing her on some level, while also having the innocence that we saw in Laurie Strode back in 1978. So there's an element of strength and an element of innocence there that I think we are passing the baton. I think she is going to be more front and center in the next two films to come. But just judging this one on its own, I really love the character. I love the way she interacted with people. I love the choices that she made, and I love how she was performed. There's one character that I want to bring up. He seems to be fairly divisive within the horror community out there. I'm talking about the little boy Julian, played by Jabrail Nantambu. And this is the character that Allison's friend Vicky babysits. The interaction between Julian and Vicky, I loved. I know a lot of people didn't, but I loved it. I loved this character through and through. This little kid stole the show in every scene he was in. His smart aleck mouth, just when children attempt to be too adult in horror films, it often comes off as kind of schlocky. And the way that he was interacting with Vicky was very much not on a 8-year-old level. It was definitely more on a 17-year-old level. And just that back and forth was just razor sharp. And the way he reacted to some scenes was just golden to me. I loved the hell out of this kid. And that's not something that I often find myself saying with horror films. But as far as the plot goes, the characters and the dialogue are what really sells this. And I love a good character-driven, well-established, well-written slasher film. So I'm going to go and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Now, I will say that when I come up with the scores of this, I typically, it just kind of comes down to gut feeling more than anything else. I don't have like a big old calculator of, marks that hit and marks that don't and averaging them out and big mathematical equations. It's basically, how did I feel about this level? How did I feel about the acting? How did I feel about the technical? And I really, I think about it for a while and I weigh things and, just in my brain, and then my gut reaction, that's the number. And I have kind of internal, I kind of typically think of anywhere between, 10 and 15 to be average, below 10 to be terrible, above 15 to 20 is, pretty darn good, and anything above 20 is exceptional. Just kind of internal categorizations like that. I think that just kind of comes up naturally. But the reason I'm saying this is because if you look at the reviews and the scores of all the Halloween movies I've done to date, this is tied for the highest with the original 1978 movie. And that was inadvertent. I was just basically gut reaction. I pulled out the calculator and just, because mental math was, if I have a calculator, I'll use it. So calculated 77 out of 100 points. I'm like, ooh, that's high. Looked, and the original was 77 too. The only one that got even close to that was Halloween H2O, was 75 points. So there was an element of me that was like, well, intent 21, yeah, maybe it should be 20. Maybe I should give it one less, just so that it's not, on the same level as the original. But you know what? I operate on a gut level, and I've learned over many years that I should listen to my gut. So I'm letting it stand. I think that on a score level, although the original is probably always going to hold a special place in my heart that will never be beat out by anybody, on an analytical, objective score level, I would say that this movie is on par with the 1978 original. Not in the same exact ways, not in the same exact, impact and acting and so on. I actually think that the plot of this one was better. I thought it was more interesting. I thought the characters were better developed. There were some aspects that weren't quite as good. But all told, taking everything, wrapping it up in a big old point system, I think it's on par and just as good as the original. And I was just pleased as punch with this one, and I cannot wait to see what happens with the next two, which now that I've run through this franchise, I am prepared to just rock and roll with as soon as they get released. So I think, honestly, that should about do it. That's everything that I really wanted to cover with this one. I feel like, wow, we're really putting an end cap on this franchise, and we're going to be moving on to something else on Monday. I have no idea what. We'll see. But that should about do it. That's my review of Halloween 2018. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you this weekend as I do, the big franchise wrap-up in my Coffee and Contemplation vlog or Monday's review. Whatever. But I look forward to seeing you soon. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my merchandise storefront links and my $1 a month Patreon tip jar links are below. You can get your name added to this list right here at the end of every video. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.